It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, June 12th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is very interested in your report from the NHL Combine, Russ.
You're all going to have to wait.
We will get to that all on today's show.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology, just after completing watching the NHL Combine in person. So we're going to get some really good insight from him today. You can subscribe or follow us for free on YouTube. We're now on the SiriusXM app as well. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, before we dig into your report from the NHL Combine, some interesting news coming out of the Stanley Cup final. And it's not about the game itself. Of course, the Vegas Golden Knights are now up 3-1. They could win it all on Tuesday.
Yep.
Back in Vegas for Game 5. That was a very interesting game, how that played out in and of itself. But the thing that's relevant for Flyers fans is Elliot Friedman gave a little latest report on news and rumors and happened to mention that Scott Laughton could be on the trading block, and that basically the Flyers don't really necessarily want to trade him, but as Danny Briere has said, they'll listen to offers on anyone, and there's definitely interest in him.
Sure. I mean, there's always going to be interest in a center only making $3 million who could play, third line center, and if you had to, second. Always. But I'll tell you, it actually was from the Combine because I listened to the report, and because Elliot was at the Combine like earlier in the week talking to GMs and such. And so my takeaway on it was the Flyers are basically saying, yeah, listen, we'll listen to offers on Scott Laughton, the same as they did on Hart. I don't expect anything to happen, though.
Yeah, I think for me, Scott Laughton is, even though he is an excellent player and he can play so many different roles, and there is a lot of reasons to want to trade for him. For me, he is that guy that the Flyers want to keep around through this rebuild and be the glue guy and the leader at the when we come out of it on the other end and have a quality team. He's one of the guys that gets to reap the benefits of this rebuild, right?
Yes, but again, it's the old story. If somebody wants to offer us something stupid, we'll listen.
Yeah, I think so as well. So turning to that NHL Combine, obviously you were just there. How did you think it compared to past years in terms of intensity or speculation or anything like that?
Well, so there were a few things that were different. The first one was when it started, it was, I would say, sparsely attended by teams. So, and that was pointed out to me by somebody else, and it didn't get much better during the day. So then we realized a lot of teams just did their thing with interviews and watched the early testing, because like when we went in to talk to some of the guys on Friday, they were just kind of going through the stations and getting used to it before they'd actually before it would count on Saturday. Right. And a lot of teams were gone. I never saw anybody from the Flyers, so they could have been gone by Thursday. They were there. I think everybody got there Monday or Tuesday, and they could have been gone by Thursday or Friday morning. So didn't see anybody there. And so I would say, if I had to make a guess, of the 32 teams, there was maybe 10 or 12 that stood throughout the day.
That's interesting.
Usually more.
Yeah, so they were there earlier in the week for all the interview stages, but once the physical tests happened, they were just like, yeah, we'll look it up or something afterwards.
Right. And so, I mean, and they may have seen some of the initial testing where guys were practicing being at the stations. They probably saw that. So yes, so that was different, because usually it was it was better. Like as an example, Kyle Dubas would always be like in the corner watching everything all the time. Every year he was not there. So he was probably gone, or I know he was interviewing guys, right? Because guys talked about him. So he was
Yeah.
gone already at that point. So there's that. Um, I think teams did um, interview more players than usual. I felt like there were so many players that said, "Well, if you talk to them, how many did you interview?" Well, 24.
Wow.
Tom Willander, I think, said 30. I think he was the highest one.
Yeah.
So like, once you get like that, you realize, okay, teams are really doing their due diligence on that.
Interesting. Yeah, I think with a draft like this where there's so many different ways they could play out, I guess teams are just trying to hedge their bets and talk to everybody they possibly can because they don't know who's going to be available when they pick.
Right. And again, there's the old saying that, hey, like everybody spoke to Connor Bedard because it's like, you never know if you get him in a trade or something. So you're not going to get him on draft day, but it doesn't mean you won't get him at some
Right.
point in his career. So they talked to him. But they also, an interesting thing was like with Lucas Carlson. Uh, Lucas Carlson was interviewed by like the Red Wings. And so he was asked about all the other Swedes in the draft because the Red
Right.
Wings knew, hey, we're not getting Lucas Carlson, but we could use him as like an advanced scout and get an idea of what he thinks of these other players that he's played with, and that's valuable information. So that's another way that you could use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So in terms of the Flyers, we were talking right before we started recording, and you were saying it's almost as important who they didn't talk to as who they did. So, like, what did you mean by that?
So what I meant by that is, if I just walked around and said, "Did you talk to the Flyers?" and they said yes, it's like, okay, but I kind of knew they were talking to you. I've got to select out a group of guys that I don't think that they would talk to, and for various reasons. Too short, too skinny, too small for the position, those kinds of things. Things that they've been consistent with messaging all along here, like even what Brent said, a couple of weeks ago, Brent Flair. So uh, I went and did that, and wasn't surprised that they, spoke to Zach Benson, because they did say, "Hey, you got to talk to a super highly skilled guy. If you don't, you're potentially missing out." So they did that. So check that off. Um, but like a guy like Luca Cagnoni, 5'9" defenseman, they didn't talk to him.
Right.
Andrew Strathman, no, he's 5'11", and he's a pretty good defenseman. So, and then I asked other guys that I could tell would be little longer term projects, like they're 160 pounds. Didn't talk to them. So what I ascertained, and it's not a perfect science, but I spoke to a lot of players. What I ascertained was the Flyers, what they said that they've done in the past, and what they like, and what they're going to do, is so far what they're going to do. And so, like towards the end of the draft, uh, I started getting a lot of hits on guys that the Flyers spoke to. They were guys like Charlie Stramo, who's big and strapping and strong, and
Right.
and Brady Cleveland, and guys like that. Cam Allen. These guys are all big, strong, either defensemen. Two of them were defensemen. Stramel's an offensive guy, and that's when I said, okay, I kind of see that, and it's not a perfect science, obviously, because if the board changes, maybe they'll change. But if everything kind of goes to plan, I think they're exactly what you think they're going to take is what they're going to take as far as type of player.
Yeah. That is very intriguing, based on what we've talked about. And there were over 100 players invited
Yeah,
to the combine, and so you have guys there that could potentially go second, third round
yeah,
in the draft. So when you're picking at that point, obviously the risk goes up, and the chance of getting an NHL player goes down a little bit. So these conversations are actually pretty important. Well, so based on all of that, it seems like there's some different scenarios that could happen for the
Yeah.
Flyers, based on who they talk to. And I think that's a perfect thing to start off talking about coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by AG1 by Athletic Greens. Keeping up with proper nutrition is really hard. You're busy, you're stuck at your desk, you're eating whatever you can to just get through the day. But what if you could start your day with the ultimate daily nutritional insurance? With a single scoop of AG1, a glass of water, you could do just that and absorb 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. Athletic Greens was created when the founder experienced a ton of gut health issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine to recover. It cost him $100 a day, which just isn't sustainable. He created Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal nutrition routine on your own, all for around $3 a day. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1 year supply of immune supporting vitamin D uh, and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
All right. Well, we'll have more draft prospect profiles as the week continues that are maybe more focused based on what we learned at the NHL Combine. And so, Russ, synthesizing everything you took away from all the players the Flyers did talk to, who they didn't talk to, and what you heard from those players that they did talk to. Like, what is your takeaway from what could potentially happen at the draft from the Flyers?
Right. So, the first scenario is they straight up pick at 7, uh, and they take like Leonard or Reinbacher. Reinbacher is definitely in the conversation here. Is it the right move? I don't think so, because I think he's a number 3 at best. But again, now there's the argument that's going around: is a number 3 worth more than maybe a second line forward? And maybe that's true, but I think Leonard could be a first line forward. So there's that. If I had to put odds on it, I would say right now the odds are probably leaning towards Reinbacher. So that's scenario number 1. And that's also skipping over Benson if he's there. Even though they spoke to him, they have to show me that they're going to take him. And I couldn't find anybody that thought the Flyers would take him that kind of knows the Flyers. So
Right.
that's one. Second one is they still go with one of those 2 picks, and then at 22, they go with either like Jaden Perron or Gavin Brindley. Now that's where they were willing to go a little smaller for the really high upside, speedy offensive player. And there's a Perron interview up on my Instagram page now at Sportsology, and you could listen to that. And he did speak to the Flyers, and Brindley, I'll put one up as well. Again, it's going to take a few days, so like we're going to cover the combine for a couple days because there's a lot to break down.
Right.
There's no way I could be one person and break it all down in a day. So, and Brindley's, for a smaller guy, a physical specimen too. Like he's just really super fit, and so those are 2 guys. So that's the other scenario. The other scenario, the third one, is still Leonard or Reinbacher. And I do think they would take Oliver Moore if he's there. Just in my mind, he may not be there.
Right.
I just want to throw that in, but I do think they would take him. So then we go down, and this is where they trade the 22nd overall pick and get like a second and a third in this draft, or a second now and a third in another draft, something like that, right? And they get the second, and they go and get like Cam Allen, defenseman, and he likens himself to Ryan McDonough. I like him because he's a guy that can be out there for heavy minutes, plays in all situations. Team coaches really count on him. So, and I even specified with him. I said, "Listen, Ryan McDonough's nickname used to be Mac Truck. Is that really what you're after here?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, I could play like that." So there's that scenario, and then just other third round options. This is where I think they're going to go big again, like they did with Devin Kaplan.
Right.
So this is like where Brady Cleveland, big defenseman that we talked about in this show, he's getting bigger as you like arm wise, and he wants to go to 230. I don't know if he'll actually get there, but he
Mhm.
wants to go to 230. And with the way he hits and the way he skates, be interesting. But but if he gets to 220, like he'll be a
That's
specimen.
a big guy.
Yep. So that's a big guy. And then, they'll probably watch Strammel. Strammel may get out of the first round, but he probably won't get out of the second. But they like that type of guy too. Uh, Big guy, can play center or wing. Uh, Again, another physical specimen, but he has good hands, good skater, and those things align with what they've talked about. So those are some of the early options.
So, I think those are interesting scenarios that you're looking at. So, you're looking at 7th overall really is kind of a toss up now between taking Reinbacher and taking a top forward, whoever
Correct.
that may be, Leonard being the most likely candidate.
Yeah.
And then the option of trading the 22nd overall pick, to me, I don't love it just because I think that they could get another quality player that maybe it'll be higher risk taking somebody at the lower pick. But at the same time, if they're really keyed in on taking, a guy that's going to take longer to develop at that pick, or looking more closely at some of those defensemen, right, that cluster at the top of the second round that we talked about last week, where there's this gap between
Right.
the top few defensemen that are like mid first round, and then there aren't really that same level of player worth picking at defense until the late first round, early second round.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just as an example, like, Cam Allen's not a big strapping guy. He's 5'11", but he is already like 190, and he's got big arms, and he's a guy that you wouldn't worry about size wise. And maybe they know he's going to grow an inch or two. Like, who knows? But I'll just go back and quote Rachel Dory, on a friend of mine, on that, where her big thing is, would it make you feel better, like as a fan or a team, if a guy grows an inch or two and all of a sudden is 6 foot instead of being like 5'10"? Like, does that make you feel that much better? And it's an interesting point because it really shouldn't,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
does seem
No.
like that's a thing.
Yeah, it absolutely could be. Now, one position we haven't talked about is the goalies. And so, what was your sense or your takeaway about the goalies? That who talked to who? Did the Flyers talk to any of them at all?
I didn't get a sense of that. I failed on the goalie mission because I was so locked in for everything else. Like, the goalies were sparse, like when they would throw them out there.
Hmm.
So I didn't get to have those conversations. So I'm going to take them at face value that they're probably not looking for a goalie, but I don't know that.
Right. I think maybe they don't think that they're in the pick position to get Hrabel or Trey Augustine,
Right.
and so they were focused on other things, and that's fair because I think that is correct that pick wise at the moment, unless they trade down with that 22nd pick, and use one of the picks in return to get a goalie, but it just doesn't seem like that's something that they're focused on.
It doesn't seem like it. But to give you an example, like sometimes talking to these guys can be hit and miss because basically, like, it's almost like you're at a fast food restaurant and they give you the buzzer and they walk by and they say Trey Augustine, and they walk by and they say this guy and that guy, right? And then you have to figure out where you want to go. Sometimes you have to go 2 or 3 places. Like, I never saw Trey Augustine. I wanted to
Right.
talk to him because they said he'll be up in 2 minutes, and then, like, I remember looking around and I was like, I don't know, maybe he was here, maybe he wasn't. Like, I just never
Right.
spoke to him. So the goalie part, yeah, I failed on the goalie part.
All right. Well, it's a busy weekend. We'll give you
Yeah.
a pass on
Okay.
that front.
Appreciate that.
But we'll definitely keep an eye on anything else we hear from the Flyers, especially if any picks get traded on draft day or whatnot in terms of what they could potentially be doing at that position. One of the other things, yeah, obviously, is like some of the athletic competitions get noticed, especially like the anaerobic exercise
Yeah.
and all of that. But it didn't seem like there was any like huge like, oh, that guy did well on this particular competition, right? Or this particular physical exercise. That it just to me it felt like from what I was hearing, it wasn't as important a factor this time around.
I can't say that yet because, like, they would have the screens and results would come up, but then I'm also talking to someone while I'm doing it, and you're trying to process it. I'm gonna go through the testing because there definitely were a few players. I spoke to one about it in particular, but I can't recall who that was right this moment, who definitely aced it way better
Mhm.
than you would expect. Oh, no, actually, it was, Tom Willander. Um,
Mhm.
I noticed some things for him and a few other players. So I'll probably have a list of like 5 that I felt like really helped themselves. It's never going to hurt you. Like the Sam Bennett pull-ups thing. Guy's playing in a Stanley Cup, right? Did it matter that he couldn't do
Right.
2 pull-ups? No. In the end,
No.
it does not matter. But you can help yourself here. But I'm not at that point yet. I need to look over the data.
Yeah, Willander did pretty well in the anaerobic fitness test, which is
The
one.
vertical leap. I remember there was a
Mhm.
big number for him, and he might have been the leader for a while.
So, it just one of those things that makes you think on the
Well, the
side a
vertical leap,
little
like,
bit.
as an example, there is, like, a science to it. So, why would you care if a hockey player could jump high? Well, because it's working with that calves and the legs, and that's where you get, like, your speed burst from.
Yeah, it's the initial speed when you're
Right.
skating.
So
Yeah.
that's the correlation there. That's why they're having him do it.
All right, any, like, fun little stories or interesting questions you heard that teams asked players?
Well, I mean, so one fun story was, towards the end, William Whitelaw, who played for, Youngstown, was saying, he's going to Wisconsin, and he's got some buddies there, and he's hoping they'll show him around and everything else. And so, like, literally 30 seconds later, I'm talking to Charlie Stramel, who is at Wisconsin and got
Right.
there a year early and is his buddy, and said yes, he would show him around. He started laughing about it and said he would show him the ins and outs and everything. So so there was some of that. Um, there's always like dad stories. Uh, so some of the dads who played, so Ethan Gauthier, uh, his dad's former Flyer defenseman Dennis Gauthier,
Mhm.
if you remember him. So what he said that was kind of funny was, and Ethan's a forward, and Dennis, was a defenseman. What was funny
Right.
about that was they asked if they'd seen his dad play at all, if he went to YouTube, and he goes, "Yeah, I looked at a few of those tribute videos." And he said when I look at those videos, he was being very physical, so maybe it had influenced him a little bit. So
That's
that was
funny.
funny, looking at tribute videos of your dad when he played in, like, back in '06, '07, like, as an example. So there was some of that. Um, there's some local guys, obviously Quentin Musty is local, uh, Gavin McCarthy, local. So they sucked up a lot of that local flavor in Buffalo, which they should. Like Musty played right on that rink at the Harbor Center when he was a kid. And then the Leafs are still doing their thing. Like they show you a play for like 3 seconds and they blank out the screen and then they tell the player, fill in the gap. What happened? What do you think happened here? So, and like Willander said, part of the problem with that was not trying to figure out what happened, but the screen is kind of limited. So you can't see everything that's sort of happening on the screen to kind of see what's developing, if you know what I
Mhm.
mean. And so that's where I thought, wow, this guy's really smart. Like this
Yeah,
kid is
you
really
need a
smart.
full view of
He
the
needs that.
entire ice.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's used to that vision that he could see all of it and then make a decision. That's to me, that was a really smart answer. So he's
Yeah.
clearly moving up in this draft. I probably even have to adjust his ranking because um, the hockey IQ is way higher than I thought.
All right. Well, We'll talk a little bit more about that. Anybody who moved up or down in your eyes based on the combine, plus have our nemesis of the week coming up next. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that that part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, Russ. So you mentioned Willander moving up in people's estimation based on the combine. Was there anybody that went up or down besides him?
Uh, I think Strammel. I remember him thinking he aced like the bench press, excuse me, and things like that. And he's got some really big, big arms, big frame. So I think he's another guy. But I don't have any other thoughts about that as far as what they did in the competition part. Like exercising.
Mhm.
As far as just mindset, certainly all defensemen and including Reinbacher have moved up. Like basically my takeaway from, all this chatter is even though you and I and a lot of other people may value a defenseman a certain way, it's almost like you're going shopping for a car and you have one day to do it. And so you're going to make the best decision you can for that day. I'm like, look, Rachel, we're going to like 6 places and then we're
Yeah.
going to get a car, right? And whichever one was best, that was best. Well, I think that's what they're going to do with defensemen, even though we don't see any as being top pairing defensemen. There's going to be a run on them, and they're identifying the ones they want, and they're going to take them anyhow.
And when you
And
say they, do you mean all
team,
teams or do you mean the Flyers?
well, definitely the Flyers seem like one of those teams, but a few other teams too. And that's the takeaway. So I'm not going to be shocked if Reinbacher goes 7. Big is still popular, by the way, being a big player. So if Matthew Wood all of a sudden is in the top 10, I'm not going to be shocked because, as an example, remember Tyler Boucher went 10th,
Yep.
Brian's kid, and Matthew Wood is way more
Yeah.
talented than
Yeah.
him. No
Like,
offense, way
I don't
more.
know if that's a good example, but
I
um,
know, but I'm just using it because it's what's in
yeah,
my head. And so, yeah, so like Matthew Wood could be in the top 10 or you might go like right at 11. So,
sure.
that's certainly happened. Yeah, I'm a little worried about maybe Benson falling a few slots. That's for sure. And there were no big name Russians there. There weren't. Dan Morris said they invited like 9 of them, and they just couldn't get out here. It was hard trying to get the visas and all that stuff aligned. It doesn't mean they won't be at the draft because they have a little more lag time on that.
All right. Well, there's certainly a lot more questions than answers, I think, at this point, and we will
We'll have more
be.
answers during the week. I'm telling you, I'm going to be looking back on this stuff.
Yeah, well, we will absolutely be touching on some of the prospects that the Flyers talk to, and especially the 22nd overall and third round options that you mentioned. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, our nemesis of the week. If you are newer to our program, each and every Monday we take a look around the league and say, what is the thing that is the Flyers' biggest stumbling block right now, or what are we most nervous about with the Flyers, and name our nemesis of the week. Last week, we talked a little bit about the outdoor game announcement and me lamenting that we would never get that Penn State outdoor game that I want so desperately, and a lot of fans would like to see. This week, I think, trying to read the tea leaves here from the combine and from trade rumors and all of that. It seems like the Flyers are really going for it in this rebuild, to a large degree, and so that just adds more questions because we won't even know where they'll actually end up picking until the last minute probably, and that is
Right.
frustrating to me because I like order in the chaos. And so, just for me personally, I understand it's the right thing to do intellectually, but I would like to know where the Flyers are picking, and I would like to know that for sure now, Russ.
Yeah, but like I spoke to an assistant GM in the league, and they get nervous the same way you do about things like that. Like, that was we were chatting about that exact thing. So that kind of anxiety hits the teams too. It does.
Interesting.
But here's my thought. So when you're traveling and you're getting like your free breakfast with a included, or you're getting something catered, like at the combine, the worst thing on the tray for me is always the bagel, because I am a bagel snob, and it's got
We
to
have
look.
we have had this conversation before, Russ.
No, but this is the difference. There's a trick. There's a twist here. The twist here is, and they're not going to like this, the Tim Hortons bagel is a very like entry level, basic,
Oh,
not great bagel here, and it was everywhere. Like, I was with Michael Jello, who lives here, and he was pointing out that's a Tim Hortons bagel. That's Tim Hortons bagel. And look, I get it. Like, if you're gonna just toast it and hope for the best, fine. It does make it a little more palatable. But I stayed away from the catering bagels, Rachel, because they don't stand up to snuff. Now, Buffalo, has good bagels, so I'm told. I didn't get a chance to check them out this time. I'll check it out my next trip here, but that's my nemesis, is just the catering bagel, or the bagel that you get in your breakfast and at the Holiday Inn or wherever. Stay away from it. Get something else. Get the English muffin. Even if it's not a Thomas's, the English muffin performs much better in this.
no, usually bagels you get at those places, like at hotels, they're all mass produced. They're not actual like local bagel joint made.
Yeah.
But yeah, all you had to say was Tim Hortons bagel, and I knew to stay away. So you go to Tim Hortons for the donuts. Let's be
Yes.
real.
The
They've got
donuts, the
some good
coffee,
donuts.
that's what
Yeah,
people like. Yes.
yeah. All right. So that will do it for today's show. Of course, we will be back tomorrow, and we are going to talk about a couple of those guys you mentioned on your report from the Combine, Jaden Perron and Gavin Brindley. So look forward to that. Of course, we always want to hear from you. So you can send us your mailbag or draft questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.